Anyone who knows me knows that I'm more than a tad obsessed with Doctor Who. Yeah, not stupid, Whovian or whatever. But I watched the first show. I know why it had to be shown again. I even wrote a pantomime at one time, a Doctor Who pantomime starring the Seventh Doctor and Ace. And then I found this. So bear with me, this is raw. This is blinking heck, I didn't know I'd written this. Pardon me, I'm getting old and I can't even see what I've written. So someone needs to select all. And yes, I could have done this beforehand. I could have. Evidently I didn't. Besides which, I'd rather talk straight to camera than away from it. I'd rather be real than... I'm not into AI. AI has its place, but not in stories. And this is a story. Anyway. Time to say Eeyore. Chapter 1. 6 months after the launch of Ark 2, all communications with the starship had been lost and man's last gasp at survival seemed doomed. Yet, deep beneath a national monument in Aylesbury, in England, a tall man in dark blue stalked well-lit concrete corridors with contingency plans for such an event. Besides him, a man in uniform matched him step for step. "I'm telling you, Brigadier," the man in the blue suit began. "We're almost ready to go." Surprise registered on the military man's face. "Are you sure, Michaels? I mean, the technology is untested and there's..." He hesitated before stating the obvious. "So much at stake." Professor Liam Michaels snorted. "I was stating the obvious." Having a reputation as a problem solver, Professor Liam Michaels had been assigned the task of researching stasis fields and their possible use for an astronaut during deep space travel as an alternative to deep hibernation. Utilising a great deal of money and a small team of scientists, he had developed an answer to the many varied problems associated with hibernation, like accidentally waking, hibernation unit malfunctioning, or human error. And it dispensed with it in a manner that was highly innovative. Yet, the Brigadier had been the one to sell the idea too. After a demonstration of the system using a mini-sub, the polluted Dead Seas and a mutated shark, the fellow had brought into Michael's plan. In essence, his idea had been to put a stasis field around a starship. Having seen what he had on the depths of the Marianas Trench, the Brigadier believed in the system, as shown, and the money flow had begun. "Well," Michaels opened with, slapping the Brigadier's back, "here we are." The doors opened, and Michaels beamed as he extended his right arm to illustrate the cavernous warehouse on the other side. "Well, there you go, Brigadier. That's where your money's gone." Before them was a huge cavern, hewn into the rock. At the centre was a ramp, which went up and up, seemingly in the darkness at the cavern's roof. At the base of the ramp there was a craft, but unlike any starship the Brigadier had ever seen thus far in his career of 35 years. Your money was well spent, the Professor told his superior, slapping on the back of his right shoulder as he grinned. The Brigadier was stupefied and thus rendered momentarily speechless. It did not look like the money had been well spent to him. Not at all. The craft itself was comparatively small for a starship and had wings, a tail, and a cockpit at its front. There was a long body to it with several portholes. It was mainly white, with bands of red ran its fuselage and wings, which had 3 each. A bank of computers stood at the bottom of the ramp and directly in front of Liam Michael, who strode proudly towards the creation. "I call it the Excel, as we will," he told the Brigadier. "But the boys have a different name for it, as you can see." So saying, he pointed towards the name, painted in the script, just below the cockpit, that proclaimed the ship Save Eeyore. The Brigadier was almost incandescent with rage, and with tight lips and red cheeks, he quietly asked, "And how are you supposed to carry mankind to safety in that?" Michaels turned to face the Brigadier, no longer jovial at all. "Brigadier," he began, "I fear you missed the point." He stalked towards the controls, his hands clasped behind his back, a determined look on his face. "I recall what I said. I told you I built a craft that would save my kind, and so I did." Reaching the console nearest to him, he pulled a lever. Then pressed a button, then turned his face towards the doorway, where the Brigadier stood transfixed. As a multicoloured vortex appeared in the dark of the cavern where the ramp ended. "I built a craft that will travel from this universe to another, carrying genetic and seed samples of every species, and one clone unit, a terraforming device that will transform a dead world into the new Eden." He looked momentarily exultant, and the Brigadier's mouth opened. Yes, he knew not what to say. Finally he asked the question that had been burning away for several minutes. "Why is it called Save Eeyore?" Michaels grinned. He knew the answer, and it amused even him. "One of my students is the captain, Brigadier student. Brigadier Stewart. He's also a Disney fan." Michaels pressed the button and then reversed his action with the lever, and the vortex dissipated, then became part of the blackness once more. And he calls himself the Saviour. Chapter 3. The Saviour. Save Eeyore. Do you get it? Well, I didn't. Not until one of my other students pointed it out a week after I'd noticed it. He smiled warmly at the Brigadier, at his own admission of prior ignorance. Though I'll concede, I do appreciate my son's humour. "Your son?" the Brigadier exclaimed, eyebrow arched. "Arrogant little shit," Liam Michael retorted. Speaking of his best students and captain of the Excel, he spat to the floor, then waved towards the Brigadier, indicating that he should join him. "Yeah, my son, they're my best student, and if I'm to die on this cesspit of a planet, I want to know I gave him one thing of worth. A chance for a new life out there," he finished, sadly. Then looking up, Liam Michaels smiled brightly and asked the Brigadier, "So, how long do I have to make lunch before assembling the scene for takeoff?" The brigadier suddenly understood the man's need for levity and responded as best he could. Just don't make it a long preparation and cooking time, Professor Michaels. That's all I'd say. And suddenly the brigadier wanted a cigarette. And he had one. That one in a tube with the label inside saying, "Brick me." He wanted a cigarette. But a man such as he. The brigadier turned his head and peered briefly at a nearby "No smoking" sign, then turned his wrist and looked at his watch. Yes, he murmured. He had time for a cigarette. The former military man salted to his pass, then removed his hat and undid his collar. Then he broke the glass tube and took the cigarette in hand. Placing the small paper roll filter end into his mouth, the ex-brigadier moved towards a nearby table on which stood a Bunsen burner. He leant over and lit his cigarette, then stood. "So, what do we call you?" Liam asked conversationally, crouching before an old-fashioned wood roller desk made of the finest rosewood. Chapter 4. Bemused, the former military man looked at his former protege, then uttered a name that few had heard in an aeon. He mused, confessing. "Deacon Waterfield? Professor Michaels? But call me Deacon, if you'll be so kind." He exhaled and idly watched the blue-grey tendrils of smoke drift upwards, then fade away into nothingness. "Like the earth? Well, I wonder." He mused. "Aye. Beat you calling brigadier in these last..." Michaels began, then ended, as the desk's roller-blind front slid upwards and he produced a bottle of whisky and 2 glasses. He turned to his couch, then stood. Michaels offered the glasses to Deacon Waterfield and sighed as he undid the bottle top. So much would be lost with man's passing. He pondered for all of a second before taking 1 glass from Waterfield for himself. "Yet, given the size of one universe, man is not even a grain of sand," he said aloud, and pouring 2 grinty glasses into... "Yet given the size of one universe, man is not even a grain of sand," he said aloud, and pouring the 2 drinks. He poured into that held by Waterfield. I did say this was raw." Setting the bottle on the floor near the cabinet, Michaels offered his glass for a salute, which Deacon acknowledged as he clinked his glass with his own. Each man downed the amber fire in one and sated. Michaels hurled his glass at the cavern wall. It went into darkness and the cave wall, and he heard it smash. Ha! Deacon followed his action. Then they smiled broadly before Michaels broke the silence. "Shall I make 2 omelettes?" Again Waterfield looked at his watch. "Yes, Michaels, that would be most agreeable." "Thank you." Chapter 5. From seemingly nowhere, Michaels produced a small tool. "Do sit," he requested, and Deacons did so, finding no reason to do otherwise. After all, the earth might be destroyed in hours. "May as well enjoy the end on a full stomach," Michael assured Deacons, adding, It'll be about 7 minutes. All right? Deacon Waterfield nodded. 7 minutes sounded all right to him. And the ticking of his watch seemed interminable as Deacon waited, but he waited patiently. After all, he considered, some all is chaos, and I get the opportunity to eat in quiet. It was as the watch dial told him it was 6 minutes and 58 seconds since Michael left. The fellow returned, holding a tray on which their food sat. I apologise for the wait. Michael's enthused, noting Waterfield looking at his watch. You were less than 7 minutes, Dickens explained. And I was just thinking about... Neither man wanted to think about what they knew for just a moment. So they ate their omelettes in the silence the Waterfield so enjoyed. Finally, both had finished eating, and dabbing his chin with a handkerchief, Michaels looked towards his friend and asked, Are you ready to meet my new crew? Waterfield nodded. About business. Picking up the plates and placing them on the tray he'd balanced on his right hand, Michaels pressed a button on the console as casually as possible. There's 4 to the crew, he began. And the world's most sophisticated computer, I believe. Waterfield grinned a little, noting that Deacon hadn't said bye. He knew how much the Excel contingency had cost. Perhaps he was the only one who knew. After all, there'd been no oversight committee on that budget, he mused, the hint of a smile becoming a smile. Then abruptly he was drawn from his reverie by the sound of approaching footsteps. Ah, here we are, Michaels thought aloud. For a long, long moment he thought that no one would show up. Time to save Eeyore.